My name is Audra Bellamy. I am 31 years old, and on the morning my father-in-law tried to sign my name off a company my husband built from nothing, he didn't know one thing. That company had been in my name for the past 2 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My husband Caleb passed away on a Thursday in February. Pancreatic cancer. 11 months from diagnosis to the end. 11 months that felt like 11 days and 11 years at the same time. He was 34. We had been married for 5 years, together for 7. Our daughter, Ren, was 3 years old and still asked every morning why Daddy wasn't at breakfast. The week after the funeral, I barely remember. People came and went. Casseroles appeared on the counter. Someone organized the flowers. Someone else ran the dishwasher. I sat in the house that Caleb and I had bought together in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I watched our daughter play with her blocks on the living room floor, and I just breathed. That was all I could manage. Just breathing. What I didn't know was that while I was just breathing, my in-laws were already moving. Caleb's family was from old money, not the quiet, modest kind. The kind that kept attorneys on retainer, had a family name on a building at a local college, and believed, deeply and without question, that what belonged to a Mercer stayed with the Mercers. Caleb's father, his mother, his older brother, they operated like a unit. They always had. I had known this from the beginning, and for 7 years I had tried to find a place inside that unit. I brought food to holidays. I remembered birthdays. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I thanked his mother for advice she gave me without asking. None of it was ever enough. Caleb knew. He always knew. He told me once, early in our marriage, lying in bed with the lights off, that his family didn't know how to love people outside their circle. They'll never say it out loud, he said, but they'll show you every day. He wasn't wrong. After Ren was born, it got worse. His mother made comments about how I dressed her. His brother's wife refused to include me in family photos and nobody corrected her. His father once introduced me at a dinner party as Caleb's wife and then turned away before I could speak. And Caleb slowly, quietly started protecting me. I didn't realize the full extent of what he had done until the day his father showed up at my door. It was a Sunday, 12 days after the funeral. I had just put Ren down for a nap. I heard the knock and opened the door to find my father-in-law standing on my porch, in a pressed button-down, holding a leather folder, and behind him, his attorney. He smiled at me, that particular smile he had that never reached his eyes. "We need to talk about the business," he said. Caleb had started a construction consulting firm called Cedar Line Group 6 years earlier. He built it from a one-person operation in our spare bedroom into a company with 11 employees, 3 major commercial contracts in the Triangle area, and a reputation that was genuinely good. He worked hard. He believed in it. When he got sick, he kept going as long as he could. He didn't tell most of his clients until he had to. He didn't want the company to feel uncertain. He wanted it to survive him. I stepped back and let them inside. We sat at the kitchen table. The attorney opened the folder. My father-in-law folded his hands and spoke in that measured, careful voice that I had learned meant he had rehearsed this. "With Caleb gone, the business needs proper stewardship," he said. "We've spoken with his partners. We believe the best path forward is a transition of ownership to someone who can give it the attention it needs." "And who would that be?" I asked. He smiled again. "The family." I looked at the documents the attorney slid toward me. They were transfer papers. My signature line was already flagged with a small adhesive arrow. Clean, prepared, professional. I looked at the papers for a long moment. "I'll need to have my attorney review these," I said. His expression shifted, just slightly. "That's not really necessary. These are straightforward documents. Standard transfer." "I'm sure they are," I said. "I'd still like my attorney to look at them." He leaned forward then. The mask slipped, just a little. "Audra, this company carries the weight of contracts, employees, legal obligations. You have a 3-year-old daughter. You have enough to deal with. Let us handle what Caleb built. That's what family is for." The way he said family, like it was a word that applied to him and not to me. I appreciate that, I said. I'll be in touch. He held my gaze for a moment. Then he picked up the folder, nodded once, and left. After the door closed, I stood in my kitchen for a long time. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear Ren breathing through the baby monitor on the counter. Then I picked up my phone and called the one person I needed. He came, I said when she answered. I know, my attorney said. I've been waiting. Tell me everything. Her name was Simone, and she had been Caleb's attorney first. He had brought her in 9 months ago, shortly after his diagnosis, when he was still well enough to sit at a desk for a full day. He had introduced her to me then, not as a formality, but with intention. If anything happens, he told me, you call her first, before anyone else. Promise me. I had promised. What I didn't know at the time was everything Caleb had already done. Simone had me come to her office the next morning. Ren came with me, sitting on a chair in the corner with a tablet and headphones. Simone set a binder on the desk between us and opened it. Let's start from the beginning, she said. 8 months before he died, Caleb had restructured Cedarline Group. He dissolved the original partnership agreement, bought out his minority partner at a fair valuation, and reformed the company as a single-member LLC. He changed the registered owner. To me. Not to himself, to me. My name, my social security number, my signature on the operating agreement. I stared at the document. He never told me. He didn't want to worry you, Simone said. He said you had enough to carry. She paused. He also knew his family would move fast. He wanted the transfer to already be done before anyone had reason to contest it. I sat with that for a moment. My husband, who was managing chemotherapy and fatigue and fear, had spent his energy making sure his daughter and I would be protected. There's more, Simone said. She turned to the next section of the binder. Caleb had also updated all personal and business accounts. He had added my name as sole beneficiary on every account. He had signed over the deed on the house to joint tenancy with right of survivorship, which meant when he died, the house passed to me automatically, outside of probate. He had maintained a life insurance policy of $600,000, with me as the sole beneficiary. He had also left a formal letter, notarized, documenting what he described as a pattern of financial interference by his parents during his lifetime. 2 occasions when his father had pressured him into making business decisions against his own judgment, one of which had cost Cedarline a contract. He had documented it. Dates, dollar amounts, emails he had printed and filed. Why did he document that? I asked. Simone looked at me steadily. Because he wanted to make sure that if they ever challenged any of this, there was a record showing motive. I felt something move through me that I couldn't fully name. It wasn't grief, exactly. It was something quieter and more permanent than grief. It was the recognition of how deeply someone had loved me while I hadn't even known the shape of it. I cried in that office. Ren climbed off her chair and came and pressed her face into my arm and said, Mama? And I held her and said, I'm okay, baby. I'm okay. I wasn't okay, but I was going to be. The call to my father-in-law came on a Wednesday. Simone placed it on my behalf from her office, with me sitting across from her. It was brief and professional. She informed him that she represented me as sole owner of Cedarline Group, that the company's ownership had been legally transferred 8 months prior and was fully documented with the North Carolina Secretary of State, and that any further contact regarding the business should be directed to her. There was a pause on the line. Then my father-in-law said, Put Audra on. Simone looked at me. I nodded. She handed me the phone. What did you do? He said. It wasn't a question. His voice was low and controlled, and underneath it was something I had never heard from him before. It took me a moment to identify it. It was panic. I didn't do anything, I said. Caleb did. Silence. He planned this, he said. He planned to protect his family, I said. His wife and his daughter. Yes. Another pause. Then, quieter. You can't run that company. I've been running it for the past 11 months, I said. While Caleb was sick, I've been managing the operations, the client communications, the payroll. I know every employee by name. I know every contract. I've been there. This was true. When Caleb got too sick to be in the office every day, I had stepped in, quietly, without announcement. I had learned everything I could as fast as I could, because that was what he needed, and because I was not going to let what he built fall apart. You never said anything, my father-in-law said. Nobody asked, I said. He started again. His tone shifted into something that tried to be reasonable. Audra, think about this rationally. You're grieving. You have a child. The business world is not. I'm going to stop you there, I said. Not loud, not hard, just clear. I didn't call you to negotiate. Simone called to inform you. The ownership is settled. The house is mine. The accounts are mine. If you have questions about Caleb's estate, you're welcome to have your attorney contact Simone. Silence again. We're family, he said finally. I thought about all the Sunday dinners where his wife spoke over me. I thought about the family photos I was cropped out of. I thought about the way they looked at Ren, their own granddaughter, like she was an accessory they hadn't ordered. You had a chance to be, I said, for 7 years. I handed the phone back to Simone. She placed it down. And that was the last real conversation I had with my father-in-law for a long time. The weeks after that were complicated in the way that grief is always complicated. It doesn't go in a straight line. Some mornings I woke up and felt something close to capable. Other mornings I lay in bed and couldn't understand how the sun kept rising the same way it always had, like nothing was different. Ren helped with that. 3-year-olds don't allow you to stay in bed. 3-year-olds need breakfast and shoes and someone to narrate the plot of whatever cartoon they're watching. She needed me present, and so I was present, and that was probably the thing that kept me moving more than anything else. At Cedar Line, I made some decisions. I brought in a general manager, a woman named Joss who had worked with Caleb for 3 years and knew the company's culture inside and out. I was honest with her and with the team. I told them I was not going anywhere. I told them Caleb had trusted me with this and I was not going to let that mean nothing. 2 of the 11 employees cried. One of the older project managers, a man who had known Caleb since before the company was called anything, told me that Caleb had mentioned me in a staff meeting once, early in his illness, without explaining why. He had said, "Whatever happens, Audra will handle it," and then he had moved on to the agenda. I think about that a lot. 2 months after the phone call with my father-in-law, I received a letter from their attorney. It was exploratory rather than formal. It raised questions about the timing of the business transfer and suggested that there might be grounds for a claim. Simone read it and told me it was a pressure tactic, not a real legal argument. She responded on my behalf, citing the documented transfer date, the operating agreement, the Secretary of State filings, and Caleb's notarized letter. She also noted, calmly and without drama, that any litigation attempt would require opposing counsel to explain to a court why the family of a deceased man was seeking to remove his widow and young daughter from assets he had deliberately and legally placed in their names. We never heard from their attorney again. What we did hear, through people we both knew, was that my father-in-law had told several people in their social circle that Caleb had been taken advantage of in his final months. That I had manipulated him while he was sick. That the whole situation was tragic. I heard this, and I felt something cold settle in my chest, and then I let it go. People who knew Caleb knew who he was. They knew he was precise and careful, and not a man who was led by anything other than his own judgment. The ones who believed my father-in-law's version didn't know my husband, and their opinion of me was never something I had any control over. Ren turned 4 in the spring. We had a small party in the backyard with balloons and a sheet cake with a butterfly on it because that was what she asked for. Her preschool friends came. Joss came. My sister drove up from Charlotte. It was a warm day, the kind that makes you believe in things a little more than you did the day before. At some point in the afternoon, I stood near the back fence and watched Ren run across the grass with a girl from her class, both of them shrieking about something that only 4-year-olds could find that funny, and I felt the weight of everything that year had been, and then I felt something else underneath it. Steadiness, I didn't know, when I married Caleb, that I was marrying someone who thought about contingencies, who made plans, who sat with an attorney in the months between his diagnosis and his death and structured everything with the care that a person structures the thing they love most. I didn't know I was capable of running a company or sitting across from a man who intimidated me for years and holding my ground, or getting up every morning in a house full of grief and still making pancakes and packing a small backpack with a butterfly on it and walking a child to school. But I had done all of those things, and I had done them because Caleb believed before I did that I could. The Mercers never came to Wren's birthday party. They hadn't called since the phone call with their attorney. There was a version of me from 2 years earlier that would have been hurt by that would have found another casserole to bring, another birthday to remember, another joke to laugh at. That version of me had worked so hard for something that was never going to be given. I wasn't that version anymore. Caleb had built something real. A company, a home, a life. He had protected it the only way he knew how, quietly and completely, and then he had handed it to me and trusted me to carry it. They called me someone who didn't belong. They looked at me like I was something temporary, something Caleb would eventually correct. They never asked my name at parties, never remembered my opinions, never once tried to know me. And in the end, they stood in front of an attorney's letter and realized that the woman they had dismissed had been holding everything the whole time. I didn't need them to understand that. I just needed Wren to grow up knowing that her father loved her mother enough to make sure they would be okay. She will. I'll make sure of it. On the morning I finally walked through the Cedar Line office as its official owner for the first time, I stopped at the small framed photo Caleb had kept on the wall near his old desk. It was a picture of the three of us from a camping trip in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Wren about 8 months old, strapped to Caleb's chest, both of them squinting at the sun. I looked terrible in the photo. Hair everywhere. A smear of something on my jacket. But I was laughing. I left the photo exactly where it was. Some things you keep exactly where they are. There's a photo on the wall at Cedar Line's office. 3 of us on a mountain trail, Wren strapped to Caleb's chest, me looking like I haven't slept in a week, all of us squinting into the sun. I walk past it every morning, and every morning I think about the fact that Caleb took that trip, knowing even then that he wanted to build something that would last beyond him. I used to think protection meant being physically present, standing between someone and whatever was coming. But Caleb taught me that real protection is quieter than that. It's the document you file on a Tuesday afternoon. The attorney you introduce your wife to, not as a formality, but as a plan. The notarized letter in a binder that sits in a drawer until the day someone decides to test what's yours. He was thinking clearly when the rest of us were just trying to get through the day. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the grief, not the anger at his family, but the clarity he had. He knew exactly what kind of people surrounded him, and instead of fighting them openly, he outthought them. He built a wall they couldn't see until they walked into it. I've thought a lot about what it means to do right by people when it costs you something. Caleb could have spent those final months focused only on himself, on being sick, on being afraid. Instead, he spent them thinking about Wren, about me, about the 11 people who worked for him. That's not something you learn from a book. That's a quality you either build in yourself over years or you don't. He had it completely. And then there's what I had to build in myself in the months after he was gone. I didn't know I could sit across a table from a man who had intimidated me for 7 years and not flinch. I didn't know I could read a balance sheet or manage a payroll cycle or make a call to a general manager on a Monday morning and sound like I knew exactly what I was doing, even when part of me was still figuring it out. But I did those things, not because I wasn't scared, but because the fear stopped being bigger than the reason to keep going. That's the thing about hard situations. They don't reveal weakness. They reveal what was already there, waiting. Wren needed a mother who didn't collapse. The company needed someone who showed up. I needed to know for myself that I was more than the woman who got cut out of family photos and talked over at dinner. I was. What happened with my father-in-law and his attorney and those flagged transfer papers, that wasn't luck. It was the result of a man who loved his family enough to think ahead, and a woman who respected that love enough to carry it forward. Cause and consequence, running in a straight line. They came prepared, we were more prepared, not out of revenge, but out of care. Ren will grow up knowing her father made sure she was safe. I'll make sure of that. And on the days when things feel hard, when running a company and raising a daughter and missing someone every single morning feels like too much, I walk past that photo on the wall. And I remember what Caleb believed before I did, that I could handle it. He was right.